All right, we'll call to order Whatcom Transportation Authority Board of Directors meeting for Thursday, July 18th, 2024. Let's start with roll call. Here.
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 I can't hear the person doing roll call, but perhaps Lund was asked and I'm here.
Yeah, I can't hear either.
Sorry, Donovan.
Here.
Sadhu.
Here.
Stewart. Here. Williams, currently absent, and Darwin is absent. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Item C, citizen communications. Each speaker is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes. We will be timing anyone who would like to speak. If there's anybody online, please unmute and speak. If there's anybody in person, please.
Oh, here's Skip.
All right, go ahead.
My turn, thank you. My name is Dwayne Bernacki, and I am resident council president for Woodway Assisted Living. We have about 72 residents at Woodway, and we really want to thank you for the opportunity for paratransit to come in and out, probably 25 to 30 times a day to our facility. One of the concerns that we do have, and we'd like the opportunity for you to take a look at, is the turnaround time of 45 minutes. Most of the time, we are picked up from our facility a half an hour, 45 minutes before our time that we're supposed to arrive. This morning, I told them I wanted to be here at 8 o'clock. I got here 20 minutes after 7, which is fine. We like to arrive early. One of the problems, though, is if I were going to Walmart to pick up a prescription that takes me 10 minutes or 15 minutes, had I got to Walmart at 20 minutes after, I would have been through by 7:30. My pickup time wouldn't have been until 8:45 because it's 45 minutes after the time that I'm supposed to arrive. So I'm waiting an hour and a half to be picked up for a 15-minute or 10-minute to pick up a prescription. I use the transits sometimes more than one time a day, and I waited more than an hour each time, so that's 2 hours per day. I realize there's scheduling problems and we have to do that. I came from Olympia, and I used what they call dial-a-lift there, which is a paratransit type facility. They did not have will call like we have here for doctor's appointment. We really want to thank you for that, because most of us seniors, I'm 80 years old, and we go to the doctors a lot, and that really works very well. But what they had in Olympia, you would schedule a time for you to be picked up, and we usually scheduled it far enough ahead that we were sure we'd be through with whatever errand we were running. But if for some reason we were through a half hour, 45 minutes, or an hour like it would have been here for Walmart, we had the opportunity to call. And if they had a bus available in the area, they would pick you up early. And I used to get picked up probably 80% of the time within 10 or 15 minutes time that I called. And I would like you to see if you could work something. I know it's a new system that we used to have will call, which was wonderful, but I understand we had to change that. But since we changed it to 45-minute window, in my opinion, since we usually get to wherever we're going a half an hour before, we're usually through with whatever we have to do before our time that we were supposed to arrive. So we're waiting, like I say, 45 minutes to an hour. I don't know if the opportunity would be to narrow that time down if we had an option between 45 minutes or 20 minutes, or if we had the opportunity, like we did in Olympia, to be able to call. And if there were a bus in the area, I know I go to the food bank every once in a while, and there are 2 or 3 buses while I'm waiting for my hour. It's an hour's wait almost every time.
So I think that
2 or 3 buses that drop people off, but they can't pick me up.
So, yep, we're all hearing what you're saying. And I think that those wait times are always on our mind and we're always looking for ways to improve that. So I appreciate you coming in. Thank you so much. Let's see, item D, board action, consideration of setting a public hearing on the transit development plan. Tim.
Morning, board members. Tim Wilder, Planning Director. This is an item seeking a public hearing for the annual transit development plan. Obviously, as it's indicated, we do this once a year. We don't have a copy of the plan ready for you yet, but it will be ready for the hearing, prior to the hearing. So the TDP, as it's called, contains an analysis of existing service and capital projects, as well as planned service and capital projects, and a little bit about the organization. So we will have this out for public comment prior to the hearing, and we'll be sure to submit any comments that we receive on the transit development plan. And this is something that's required by the state. It informs the state legislature of every single transit agency activities. So with that, we are seeking for you to set a public hearing
For August 1st.
August 1st.
I'll move we set the public hearing for August 1st.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. Are there any questions, comments, concerns? All right, all in favor of setting a public hearing, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Doesn't look like it. All right, thanks, Tim. Item E is the consent agenda. Exciting stuff.
Move approval. I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions, comments about the consent agenda? All right, moving right along. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. Item F, quarterly board strategic discussion, decarbonization strategy. Ooh, I said it, it's early. I thought I was gonna trip up on that one. Lex.
Yeah, so in consultation with Ali as board chair, thought tee it off with some situational awareness, where we are with things, what the strategies are, and then some of the knowns, unknowns, and then open it up for board discussion, policy discussion on where we should be headed and how these strategies sound and so forth. So what we as staff have been trying to look at is how do we show commitment to the environment in a way that is operationally and financially and environmentally sustainable. What are those things that we can be doing? To be effective, we felt like we needed a multi-pronged approach to help us now and into the future. It's a little broader than just the propulsion system of the vehicle, because there are other things that we can be doing. Propulsion systems, obviously, the far and away the highest financial investments, and also comes with the biggest risks on it. But there are other things that we can be doing as well. So the current decarbonization strategies that we have are to work on continuing to clean our mix of vehicles. So looking at the fleet right now, for situational awareness, we have 63 fixed route buses. Of those, 51 are diesel, 8 are hybrids, and 4 are battery electric buses. By the end of this year of 24, we'll have on hand, the mix will be 40 diesel, 11 hybrids, and 12 battery electric buses at the end of the year. Then moving forward, in 26, we'll replace 8 more diesel with hybrids. In 27, replace 3 diesel with a zero emission technology, whether that's battery or hydrogen will be determined. In 28, then we'll replace 6 more diesel with low or no emission buses. So at the end of 28, our fleet mix of 63 fixed route buses will be 23 diesel and then 40 low or no emission, 15 zero emission and then some mix of 80-25 of hybrids or additional no emission. So that would mean about 60% of the fleet would be low or no emission in 28. And then that's if everything stays the same. If we were to expand service, then we would look at talking about low emission, the battery electric or the battery hybrids on that. So that's one line of effort on it, or one strategy is continuing with that mix. Another one is to use renewable fuels. As you've seen, if you use hybrids and those renewables, you get about the same environmental positive impact as the electric buses over about the next 5-6 years because of the mix of the grid on it. So that's another way of doing it. It could significantly lowers the well-to-wheel impacts on it. Has a smaller impact on tailpipe, but a large impact on well-to-wheel on that. Continuing with local carbon offsets, action step on that we just had with the land trust. Reducing single occupancy vehicles or converting those car trips to other forms, walking, biking, obviously transit. And ways of doing that, the partnership with Smart Trips. When I say we, WTA has significantly increased investments in that to try to transition those. The transit-friendly development, if you have the Linden Station as an example on that, and increasing and service and making service a better option to do that. And then there's also our sustainability plan, which talks about reducing our water, our electricity reductions, composting, those kinds of things as well. So our immediate goal is what are those actions that we can take right now and into the future as we continue to go towards the goal of the board set in 2040. Some of the knowns that are out there is we know the transition to a battery electric bus is very expensive. The buses are approximately 1.5 or 1.25 million each. But what's even more expensive is the supporting infrastructure that goes with that. And that can be up to, depending on which kind of charger you pick, it could be up to $80 million in supporting infrastructure in addition to the buses to do that. The bus supply chain, it's down to 2 electric bus manufacturers. There's a third that's coming online. So that's been an issue. We can only fund this, that transition of propulsion system with federal subsidies or state subsidies on that. The technologies in the early stages, as we know now, electric buses can do about 55% of our routes. As the technology increases, that will increase. I heard Secretary Pete Buttigieg on a podcast refer to this as the Model T stage, that things are increasing and getting better, but we're still in that beginning stage. The zero emission buses aren't a one-to-one replacement. We have a charging technology that is developing and still in the nascent part of that. And then we also know that there's a lot of innovative technologies that are out there. There's containerized grids being experimented with in Anaheim. There's renewable fuel development that's going on. So there's a number of innovative things that are going on. The unknown part of that is we don't know when those will come online, how effective they'll be, will these things all work. Some of the other unknowns are the grid. The various components of that grid are the generation, the transmission, the distribution, the storage components of it, and then the grid competition as well with data centers, with land use switching to buildings being electric, all these kinds of things. As there was just a Seattle Times article about Seattle City Light and their demand issues and going out, having to try to buy on the market. There's also another Seattle Times article about the data centers and the impact that's having on demand and on the grid, which goes back to that generation and how you transmit it in a way that is resilient with forest fires and those things, because a lot of it's being generated on the east side and how do you get it across to the west side? So there's a lot of unknowns on the grid aspect of it. We'll see how the bus manufacturer market comes out. One of the big ones in my mind unknown is the hydrogen hub and what happens with that. Whatcom County was awarded the hydrogen hub, or one of the hydrogen hubs. And we'll see how AltaGas can pull that off and how other sectors in Whatcom County adapt to where do they go. For example, the maritime sector. We've got All American Marine making a hydrogen ferry that's in testing stage down in the Bay Area. If that takes off, will that increase the demand for hydrogen such that that affects the market, and how do we adapt to that, because it could make the market great. The unknown propriety aspects of technology development. Some of the chargers aren't universal, so they're tied to the bus manufacturer, and so it reduces your flexibility on that. We don't know the future of the subsidies and what that's going to level that's going to stay at. And we also don't know on the competition aspect of those, because while there was the BIL, the infrastructure law, there was $5 billion for zero emission low no buses. That's not enough to do every bus in the United States, so it becomes a competitive grant. So with all that, what we're trying to do is figure out how do we best allocate our resources in an environmentally, financially, and operationally responsible way that doesn't adversely affect service or have other secondary ramifications, cutting other projects that we would like to do, like transit-oriented development or those kinds of things. So we're trying to understand the second and third order effects and unintended consequences. So working closely with like King County Metro and their experience, they've had a bumpy experience with their 59 electrics. Spokane Transit has run out of electricity. They have to now they're working on how do they generate more on that. So trying to look around corners. But with that, the common theme throughout this is we're trying to make environmental impacts now and as this journey goes on with that goal. And then obviously without jeopardizing service or service reliability, which has its own positive environmental impact in of itself. So with that, as a situational awareness, I'll stop and stand by for questions and listen to the discussion and framework for going forward.
All right, discussion. Who wants to talk about pie charts?
I want to talk about pie charts. So I got some pie charts. These pie charts show percentages of technology. I think the numbers or proportions are pretty close to what staff is talking about. So
Is there any chance you can Michael, can you screen share your pie charts?
Yeah.
Or just
you find a way to do that.
or email them real quick.
Or email them.
So if the proportions are slightly off, don't get wrapped. Oh, I need one copy.
Too bad.
Sorry. If the proportions are sort of off or the dates are sort of off, don't get hung up in that, okay? Because I was trying to go based on memory of these things. What I was trying to do in my discussions with Les last week is figure out what the main policy choices are and where, and then the flip side of that, what aspects of any transition are not really decisions that the board needs to make. And let me kind of go through what I think I've figured out, and please tell me on each of the 4 points I'm going to mention whether I'm wrong. One is that growing battery electric is part of any scenario in the short term and the medium term and probably in the long term. And that's because battery electric is kind of one of the least risk options. I'm not saying no risk, but if you're going to go with zero emission, it's certainly less risky than hydrogen. So that's the first thing. So look at the blue. You have a pie chart in front of you. Look at the blue portion. It starts out currently around 20%, and it grows whether we fork to left or right. And left is no hydrogen, and right is hydrogen. The other thing is that no matter what, we need a reliable, what I call longer distance bridging technology, a technology that can handle all of our routes, not just some of our routes. And that's part of any scenario in the short term. And so the lowest risk way to do that is with the hybrids, with the special fuel mix. So the hybrids, again, are part of any scenario for quite a while. No board decision needed on that either. The fork in the road, and there is a fork in the road, is a few years away, and that fork is the big, somewhat binary choice. Do we eventually go heavy on EV, or do we go light on EV because we go heavily on hydrogen? In my scenario, we never go more than half on hydrogen. I don't know if that's a dumb idea or not. It just seems to me that battery, we have a certain proportion of our routes which are probably better served by a more reliable long distance technology. Not that batteries aren't getting better. So I kept the alternate long distance technologies around a third. Again, my numbers could be totally wrong. So the big fork in the road, the big decision is a couple years out, and that's whether you go left or right, whether you start going into hydrogen or not. In my understanding of going to hydrogen, I still see the hybrids staying around. They're reliable, they're low risk, they'll be around for a significant while. And then the actual percentages and proportions on my graphs, it's really more a matter of timing, funding, procurement, logistics, technological maturity. It's all looking around the corners that Les was talking about. I don't see those as so much as board policy decisions, but as a sort of decisions that are driven by information the staff will be developing. That we're not going to, we can't affect the rate of funding or procurement with our decisions. We can't affect technological maturity with our decisions. Those are decisions that we forced upon us by what is happening in the world. So again, paradoxically, that's not a board decision. What I'm trying to say is for the board, there's really one major point of decision, and that's the fork in the road. Otherwise, we know we're going to rely on hybrids. We know we're going to increase our battery electric, and then the fork comes on the road. So that's my thinking on this. And what I came up with is actually the board's role is smaller than I thought it would be. If we're committed to transition, then the fork in the road is the major thing we need to consider. So that was my thinking. I have 4 points. You can tell me all 4 are wrong or whatever, but that was my thinking. And I hope it's useful to the rest of the board because it simplified the picture for me.
We don't have to do anything for 7 years. No, just kidding.
Staff does. Staff does.
Todd.
Can't hear you.
Because I was muted. There we go. Still early. Appreciate the graphics, Michael. But as far, and I talked briefly about this with Les, there's maybe a decision too, as well as what are the trade-offs between how much we are committed to decarbonizing just through vehicles and counting that as a success versus maybe spending less on some of these vehicle transitions and more on stuff that is expanding access, whether it's the bus rapid transits things or other programs that we could also then look at as that's got a net decarbonization benefit. And I don't know how much we sort of made this decarbonization commitment to zero emission vehicles, but are there other ways to get there that might be quicker or cheaper, depending on how we count what counts as decarbonization? And that does get to more maybe earlier in this chain here, discussion and decisions. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I guess it depends on what the trade-offs are like. If we're pursuing grants to do the vehicle decarbonization, does that limit our capacity to get grants and do things to increase access and ridership, and then getting people out of vehicles that would also count towards decarbonization? But I think that's a more immediate policy discussion even.
Get people on the bus.
Yeah.
Satpal?
Yeah, I will bring up this again, that I think we do get obsessed with net zero. This is not only for WTA, in the whole society, all the way to United Nations. Everybody is talking net zero, net zero. What's wrong with net 80? We rather spread it wide than going vertical. We picking up, that's the same point Todd just made. that we are looking at very narrow concept, but we want to do 100% of that. You know, it's always the last 20% is the most expensive to achieve, but we can achieve 5 things at 80%. I think we would overall gain much better on the environmental and better use of our money. I think that this is a great idea that Les has brought up, that we should really revisit or at least rethink that what are the other things we can do and still have net impact. The other part is this is a fallacy that if in the United States of America we can achieve net zero, the environmental will be just fine. It won't be. So we should always keep that in mind. This is not an isolated case. It may look good to us, but this is not an isolated case. Okay, thank you.
Kim?
I just wanted to echo that Councilmember Donovan's comments are very much in line with my thinking right now. And in the short term, I see so much opportunity for us to achieve some of these goals through increased ridership. And I also wanted to say, I invited Seth Vidania from our climate office. He spent a lot of time thinking about this issue, and I invited him to listen, and I see he has his hand raised. So I'll stop talking because he's the expert and invite Seth to talk.
Unmute there. And Mayor, thanks for the invite. Folks, thanks for hosting me and us today. And I'll just jump on the same bandwagon as Councilmember Donovan, his comments. I'm aligned with Mayor as well. And I'd love to see, I know this is more work, but I'd love to see some modeling on what's the best way to spend these extra funds to decarbonize, right? Because we get really sucked into thinking about tech. And if we really do want to increase ridership, there's money that can be spent on campaigns and access, as Todd mentioned, that might be a cheaper way to decarbonize our community as a whole. And that's not something that can be done, I think, just in a conversation. That's a modeling exercise. That's a consultant doing that sort of work. But where do we spend those dollars to maximize the decarbonization effect is my question. I don't have an answer to that, though I may have some expertise. I can't tell you that. But there are smart folks out there, including the staff at WTA, that can help to come up with that answer.
Thank you. Skip?
I walked in the room this morning after reading Les's thoughtful questions. And to me, the fundamental question, which I've heard from the mayor, Seth, Todd, is what role does purchasing all of these buses and so forth, what role does that play in our comprehensive program of decarbonization? Is it a major piece of it? Is it 30%? Is it whatever? And are those other options, first of all, what is our decarbonization goals? And then what is the total program? And then how does transitioning to the options for buses fit with all of that? And that's where I think the conversation needs to go, because that is a policy question, not how many buses do we have, or is it just that we purchase buses and do nothing else? And that's an exaggeration, but I would rather talk about our total decarbonization program, and then how does the bus piece fit into that?
Well, and I think right now we're about a year and a half out to see how the new round of buses works. Les and I were talking the other day, they'll be ready for service just in time for winter, and we know how well that worked out the first round. But obviously we are hopeful that these are going to be a step up from the last, but we just never know. So there's a lot of a lot of factors that we just don't know the answer to right now as well. So it's hard to say, you know, like Michael said, there's going to be that fork in the road eventually when we have more information.
I guess I'm going to continue on the theme of get people to ride the bus. I just think that's a better use of the dollars for the long haul. I mean, I think my community, Linden, and the Guide and the Hannigan are just full of cars coming to Bellingham every day. And is there some creative way, maybe it's not a fixed route bus, but you know, paratransit sized buses that you could really market hard to get people to ride for $1, and you get 8 people on a bus and get 8 cars off the road for every bus. That would do more for decarbonizing than buying electric buses. And I think that money would be much more effectively used, even though we're still burning fossil fuels, but the global picture is decarbonizing.
Satpal?
Yeah, I wanted to ask that there must be some data that if we buy one electric bus and how many tons of carbon we save in a year against diesel and all this. So I think that we should keep that in perspective, like from battery and all the 3 or 4 options we have. I think having some number in front of them would be helpful for us also. The second thing, no, that's all I had. Thank you.
Kim?
I just wanted to kind of second what Scott shared and rethinking that there could be opportunity in the short term to rethink some of the form of the buses. I spend a lot of time on San Juan Island in the summer, and when you walk off of the ferry at this time of year, all of the transportation options are awaiting, from rideshare, taxis, and different shuttle bus options to take guests throughout the island. And at this time of year, there's like an old-fashioned trolley. The windows are down. It's an open-air concept, and people flood. They race to get on that particular option first. And so I do think that there's a case to be made if we're seeking to increase ridership. Some forms are inherently more popular than others, and that could be a strategy to explore.
Go ahead.
So to increase ridership, we have to make it attractive to ride buses and not your own personal vehicle. Coming from out in the county, it's hard to make that work. It's just not feasible that it might take 2 hours to get into Bellingham because there's not a direct route to where I need to go for my errands or the business that I need to accomplish. I was talking to an aunt who lives in Sumas the other day, and she said, when I first started working in Bellingham, I looked at riding the bus, and it was literally going to take her 2 hours to get into town and to where she worked, and 2 hours to get back out of town. She's like, I don't have 4 hours to spend in transit. So I think if we're looking at these options, yes, it may work, shuttle buses or whatever, but we just have to consider outside of kind of the densely, the urban cores, and how do we also include attractive transit for rural areas as well? Because coming from Everson, there's a line of cars go again, like Scott said, from Linden, there's a line of cars going into Bellingham from Everson. So,
well, on average, it takes about 3 times longer, I would say, to ride the bus from outside of Bellingham into Bellingham than it takes to drive. So that's Michael.
So the scenario I put out assumed we were doing a bus transition. I wasn't trying to suggest we shouldn't look at all the other ways of addressing carbon. So this is only if we're going to try to pursue 100% carbonization. If we have many other ways of addressing it, then what it really would do is it would shift these dates down. There'd be no reason to hasten this transition if we have other things that we're doing. My other comment is growing ridership is good, but if it was easy, we probably would have already done it. So we should never stop on that, but I think we have to realize that isn't necessarily going to pay off easily or quickly either, because otherwise we would have already done it. So let's keep trying, but I don't think we can assume significant major transformational success in that anytime soon.
Well, and I don't think there's any one answer either, right? It's everything. Oh, go ahead.
One thing to keep in mind as well is that the cost of car ownership is for some people starting to become a little bit more prohibitive. And therefore, when you consider the price of the car, the insurance and everything else, the maintenance that goes along with it, if you are able to educate the public that we can provide a much more reasonable service for you in terms of cost, again, that may be part of the approach to people.
Thank you. I'm not sure who was first, Todd or Satpal. You want to fight it out?
Todd, go ahead.
Todd, you're muted.
Okay, thanks, Satpal. In response to what Michael just said, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying, I don't think I'm hearing people say like we don't want to move to carbon-free buses or anything, but it's just, we do have some really ambitious plans, our 2040 goals, and I'll get into like the bus rapid transit stuff. So like that, yeah, those are going to take a long time to implement, but could we get some kind of trade-off study where the dollars that we put into something like bus rapid transit versus going fully electric or hydrogen versus some combination of this stuff with the hybrids, and by going more hybrids, how much does that open up capacity to do some of these things that would expand or potentially would expand ridership? But I mean, it's like just having cool electric or hydrogen buses isn't going to get more people on, and it might cost a lot. But so what, what are the trajectories and trade-offs for all that stuff? Is I don't have any sense of that, but I'd like to get a better sense of that.
Is that Paul?
Yeah. What I'm thinking is that what we are trying to convince the people that we have a fixed mode of transportation, please get into our buses. Maybe we have to think the other way around, that we should change the mode of transportation. And I'll bring up again that microtransit, I think the future is that, like in simplicity, I call it that we should have our own Uber company, Uber app for Whatcom County. And we should have public-private thing. And there are a lot of people who would like to moonlight or do something, or we should have our employed people let's look at that model so that there are one or two people going, they get in a car, and that could be an electric car, and get them to the place they want to go, pick them up where they are. We are looking at a 50, 100-year-old system which was successful in dense populations, because Uber may not be the answer for Bellingham, but it may be answered for a lot of other areas. We tried Lindenhof, and I mean, the cost came out to be high, but we didn't have the private piece into it. I think that public-private partnership, we should explore more and lower the cost and increase the service. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott?
Back to the Satpal's question on the carbon footprint of what we're doing. I know it'll shock everyone in the room, but I did the math on it. So for a diesel bus, I made a bunch of assumptions, but 414 pounds per day per 100 miles to run a diesel bus. Now, if you look at if you're going to go to electric, it's got to be charged somehow. And my example always is there's hydro, solar, and wind. I call those renewable. And I'm going to assume, because they're renewable and green, we're using as much of those as we can. And after that, I'm going to assume that natural gas is and after that, we got to go to coal. And my theory is if you add a bus, the reality is it's coal. And if coal is 483, let's see here, Yeah, coal is 483 pounds per 100 miles to charge the bus versus 414 with diesel. So if it's going to be coal, you might as well give up and just go to diesel. But if it's natural gas, it drops to 103. So there's a major benefit to go to natural gas. Anyways, and I can share my spreadsheet with geeks who want to look at it because it's been reviewed by other geeks. But if we're kidding ourselves going to electric buses that we're doing something good, because likely the power is coming from some coal fire plant somewhere in the country.
Will you send it to all us nerds? Great. Thanks, Michael.
What I'm seeing makes me doubt your assumption about coal. What I'm seeing is that renewable energy is being added at a far faster pace. It's cheaper per unit. And I think in terms of total production, it's just surpassed coal. So the natural gas component aspect, I think, is very realistic. That I think their natural gas will be part of the mix. I think Washington State will be moving inevitably towards a greener grid, but I don't see the natural gas component fading out quickly. So but I wouldn't fear coal, but natural gas, I do think we have to factor into our thinking.
Seth?
Yeah, just a item on PSC. Their integrated resource plan says that they'll be coal free by 2025. So they've divested their investments in the Colstrip, Montana power plant. So that's going to be not part of their energy mixture here fairly soon. The other thing I want to say is that the city of Bellingham has entered into a contract with PSC for renewable energy, and not the normal, pay us $4 and we'll give you some renewable energy credits. But we've actually entered into agreement where PSC is now creating wind power and solar power for us in our name. So that's additive to the grid. It wasn't there before. City of Bellingham and a number of other entities are paying into this with what's called Green Direct. And so that's one way to assure that you're putting as much green energy into the grid as you're pulling out. So just a note on coal and some potential options of PSC for greening the electricity grid.
Thank you. Paul?
Adding to that, we are taking a very limited view of Whatcom County and Washington State. But if you look at if somebody 100 miles away burns coal, we are burning coal. All the natural gas we are trying not to use, the worldwide use of natural gas is increasing fourfold. So when we look at environment, we must keep in mind it's not something that what we do in Whatcom County is ultimate. I think that that the use of natural gas, I think we have gone on this thing that natural gas is bad. It is much better than a lot of options, and worldwide, if we can increase the use of natural gas, there will be net saving of the environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just point out one thing on the fuel. That's why one of the strategies is to move to that renewable fuel that, while it doesn't solve the problem, it does help reduce, and that can go into diesel buses as well as the hybrid buses. So that's one of the strategies.
Yep.
That's okay. No, I won't. I'm just going to throw this question to the middle of the table. Yeah. Well, about where the oranges are. Is bus decarbonation the priority focus of our decarbonization process? Yes or no? The major focus or the priority focus?
I think it has been the question, isn't it?
That's a question for discussion, I think.
I'm going to say yes, only because the payoffs are clear and quantifiable, whereas the behavioral shifts and changes are less certain and less quantifiable. How successful and expensive will bus rapid transit be? How many riders will be reduced?
Put in the word achievable.
Yeah. So I still think it needs to be the biggest leg, but I'm not saying it's the only leg, but I do think it still needs to be the biggest leg.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
I think it can't be the only, but yeah, and I'm okay with that too, as long as we're not married to one method or another, and we're, you know, approaching it in a way that is, I mean, adjusting as the technology improves and adjusting as more options are available. As long as we're not just married to fully electric, no matter what happens outside of that. I'm okay with that, but also we got to get people on the bus.
I guess that provided, I mean, it's all great, but what happens if the federal dollars go away? I mean, we can't afford to buy $1.2 million buses and put in $80 million worth of infrastructure to charge them on our own. And the assumption, and you said 5 billion earlier, was the
bipartisan infrastructure law, for the low-no buses.
Divided by 1.25 million per bus is 4,000 buses times 50 states is 80 per state. We probably got our fair share already.
Yeah, we got 8.
We got 8 out of the 80 for our state. I mean, these are things we have. I mean, it's all well and good to talk about we can do all of this, but with whose money and where's it going to come from?
Give us $150 million, yeah.
Okay. I got pocket change.
I kind of go back to what I said before, that some of these aspects aren't board decisions. So the pace of a transition or the direction of the transition, that's dependent upon funding.
Sure.
We don't get to step 2 or step 3 unless all the things you're referring to, Scott, exist.
Yeah.
But it's sort of saying there's still a direction, and we'll go down that road, no pun intended, as at a certain pace. And that pace depends upon whether or not it's our major strategy or only half our strategy. It depends on whether or not there's a lot of funding or not a lot of funding. But I think the trajectory still says hybrids are the easiest, least risk transitional technology, and battery electric is the least risky, most mature of the zero emission technologies. So those are part of the picture no matter what, just how much and how quickly.
And do we know, like our battery electrics, are they good for 10 years, for 20 years? Well, the life of the bus.
Yeah. It's a 12-year commitment due to the grants, right?
But will they last 20 years? I mean, because in a few years, we got to start replacing the expensive buses we've already purchased.
The batteries won't.
The batteries won't last. We know that, but okay, so you do the batteries.
How much are they per battery?
You're probably looking at 300,000 to retrofit a bus with new batteries.
And there's
Gilly predicts 8 years on life on batteries.
What's the carbon footprint on the battery?
Is that 300,000 per battery pack?
No, per bus.
Per bus. Okay.
But I mean, we haven't had. It's all new technology. Right? We have no idea.
Yeah. So to answer your question, I guess
Tell us now.
We don't know. Yeah, but it's a real cost that's coming.
Yeah, for sure.
And then disposal is an issue that is not settled. What do you do?
Keep them forever. Burn the place down. Just kidding. Seth?
There we go. I just wanted to follow up on something Sat Paul mentioned and a comment that came from the room. And I'll couch this by saying I'm the new guy here, and what I might say might sound blasphemous to WTA, but I'm not sure that the goal is to get people on the bus just from a carbon dimension, but get them to where they need to get to in the lowest carbon with the lowest carbon emissions possible. And so I wonder how much conversation there's been at WTA about taking 2 or 3 steps back and saying, so we've got to get people from A to B. And what's the best way to do that? The bus has been the tool that you all have been using to great success for a long time, but I'm wondering about other methods of getting people from A to B. So I want to just throw that out on the table and just that comment in the context of carbon. There's all sorts of other dimensions to look at. Carbon is just one of them, but it's the one that we're talking about right now.
So Seth, I'll say from a staff perspective, the answer is yes. It takes a village though. So WTA can't do it all on our own. We need land use planning help. We need parking help. We need coordination. It's across the spectrum. Is lane usage going to be taken so you can't drive buses through those areas? So there's a number of factors that are outside WTA's control. What our philosophy is, though, is how do we look at the transportation network as a network holistically, and how do we factor in walking and biking and bus and other alternative ways of getting around. And then to the discussion here, what kind of bus, what size of bus, all those kinds of things, frequency of service, where where their destinations are. And so it requires that village to come together to do that. But I think your point is very well taken, Seth, and I appreciate it.
Yep.
No, I was just talking to you.
Oh, I see. You guys don't get to know. Satpal?
Yeah, I would like to change the subject a little bit because we have only a few minutes left. One of the thoughts or ideas I would like to share with the WTA board is that we as a community, City of Bellingham, Whatcom County and Port, we are looking at starting a new wetland bank for say 1,000 acres. It could be starting with 100 acres or 200 acres as a start, as Bellingham has already started with 200 acres. And as EDI board, we invested $1 million into that. I think that is an area whereas WTA board can invest and ultimately recover that money over time. It will be investment, not expense. So, and it will be environmentally, in many ways, benefit our community. So as we were looking at ideas, what else we can do, I think there's something else I wanted to propose. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it seems like.
One comment too as well. In part of the discussion of all of this, we need to bring in the planning people, because part of the solution is planning our development around transit centers to include commercial, whatever, so that we reduce the need for people to travel from Blaine into Bellingham to do their shopping or to see their physicians. And so this is a larger picture that is going to.
Tim reaches out to the planning departments quite often.
Yeah, and I brought that up last night, was a Bellingham plan meeting that several of us from WTA attended to talk about growth scenarios for the city. And we've also been engaging with other communities on their comprehensive planning.
Right.
And I got to say that I think there's really, really good cooperation on both sides. And so I think the fundamental issue for us is not so much the land use transportation linkages that we call it. It's more about when we get down to looking at the operations, do we have support from the communities to operate in a way that supports those land uses? And we know that congestion is increasing. We know that it's difficult to operate. We may not have the streets that we can operate effectively. We're dealing with congestion in Bellingham. It's getting worse. So how do we deal with those environments, given that there's a need for more transit service in those communities? And does WTA have the commitment to provide more service to support those land uses? That's a fundamental issue that we have, since we haven't done a whole lot of new investment since development's occurred. It's been the same level. Are we going to be able to commit to that as an agency? So those are some of the conversations we're having right now with local.
So in addition to this, when we're talking about high-speed rail from Portland to Vancouver as being something that's viable, because there's no point in building more highways. They just get clogged with more cars. So this is why the push is for high-speed rail from Portland to Vancouver. But that is dependent on a very good transit system all along the way to pick up these people and deliver them to where they are actually going, so they don't have to take the car.
Absolutely, yeah, agree with that 100%.
Thank you. All right, with the last few minutes, I'd like to just open it up for future topics for these quarterly meetings. I know that we still have a lot of talking to do about this. But are there any requests for future topics for these? Go ahead.
If I could. From a staff perspective, one of the things that ties into all this is this discussion furthers it into what Tim and Mary Lou were just talking about is ridership versus coverage. How's this system allocated amongst more urban areas versus more rural areas? How are we allocating and investing resources in an intentional manner to get a bang for the buck? So if we want to invest in a lot of ridership, that may push more investments toward a more urban area.
I like that.
But we have also equity and coverage issues out in various rural areas that some of those folks, to Mary Lou's point, cost of car ownership out in some of the East County areas may be such that they have to rely on us to get them. And so that may not be high ridership, but there may be high value out of those rides. And kind of talking about that to help guide us as a framework on how we allocate resources. That could be a topic.
I like that topic.
It's a hard one, but.
Anyone else? Is Todd talking?
Yeah, I was talking to myself. I'm like, I got to get to my next meeting at 9, but I'm at Northwest Clean Air Agency in about 2 minutes. So.
All right, great discussion. Are we ready to move on?
If I could just, so the strategies of continuing to work on our fleet mix, the renewable fuel, the local carbon offsets, working hard on converting car trips through whether that's biking, walking, smart trips, more convenient, better service, and then our sustainability plan. Those strategies I'm hearing are good and really focus on the ridership part of it for now. As we continue this discussion, obviously going forward, as Michael's charts point out, there's a lot of decision points that are going to be driven by things outside our control.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure if I heard that correctly.
I just want to make one comment about the thought of Uber. That doesn't solve the problem. In fact, it accentuates the problem. Because if you're at Uber downtown Bellingham and you get called out into the urban area, or sorry, the rural area, you're driving out there to pick up someone, to drop them back, to drop them back, to drop them back. That's 4 rides for one person potentially versus one person in their car driving in and back. It doesn't solve the problem.
I agree.
But I think what I would envision is, let's just pretend we can get into Google Maps and find out how everybody gets around, and you find out that there's 10 people in this neighborhood that go from Linden to Bellingham, and they go to, within a 5-block area in Bellingham. And so you could somehow get all these 10 people on a bus together.
That's why
that local pickup, local drop off.
Right, and that's why you have HOV lanes to encourage people to ride share.
Yeah, exactly. But make it so attractive that people actually will get out of their cars and get on.
Yeah. But that's not necessarily.
No, but it would take.
Uber is, I want.
No, it's not an Uber model. It's a.
Yeah, I agree with you.
We would have to do a lot of education to encourage people to try a new way, and then make it pleasant for them. Give them, Wi-Fi on the way in, so they can do whatever they want. So it's relaxing for them rather than a headache.
Right, the opposite of on demand. Actually.
I mean, if you got $130 million that we're planning on spending, why don't we shift it to some creative, different way? At least maybe $1 million or $2 million.
I agree.
Try something different.
9 o'clock. Is there any other business?
I just say thank you. I really appreciate the discussion. It's very helpful.
Okay. Announcements? Anybody? All right, we are adjourned.
Scott, in that.
Yeah.
If you were, I mean, if you've driven through